This is Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast, with your hosts, Brandon Spinner and Michael Burns.
Welcome into another episode of Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Spinner, alongside one of my good buddies, Michael Burns. Mikey,
that's me.
How are you tonight? Yeah, that's you.
I didn't know you were talking to me. Sorry. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I've got a couple of bourbons in front of me here, and I'm excited to tell you all about one special one.
Yeah, we've got a special episode on the way. You probably already saw it in the title of this episode. Before we jump into that, we'd love to ask you to subscribe to us on YouTube. You're watching us maybe on YouTube. That's at Barrels and Barrels Pod. We're putting out extra content there, video shorts of baseball, also bourbon hunting videos, which seems to be the most popular thing we've ever posted. You can find us on Instagram. I tell you what, we post our podcasts, and I go bourbon hunting for 5 minutes on YouTube, and it goes viral. I don't get it, but that's the algorithm. Instagram at Barrels and Barrels Pod, Facebook at Barrels and Barrels Pod, and on Twitter, Barrels and Barrels. You can also review us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you get podcasts, really, but we're also on Google, iHeart, as well as Amazon Podcasts. Please rate us, review us, just like we rate and review our whiskeys and talk baseball. We'd love to hear anything, good, bad, whatever. And we have a poll in this episode on Spotify. So go vote in that poll and tell us what you think. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests. We've got another interview. And the gentlemen from American Mash and Grain, we've got Devin Ershow and Chase Langdon. Or is it Langdon?
No, Langdon.
Langdon.
You got it right.
All right.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Thanks for joining. We get that Devin's a Mets fan by his shirt. But Chase, you both baseball fans?
Yeah, both baseball fans. I would say I was a better fan in my youth than I am presently. So I would consider myself a bad Yankees fan at this point in time.
They're all bad
there's
Yankees.
what's the difference?
No.
He says that the Yankees aren't on top and they're raining, but
you can't kick a team in the middle of the table. We're 9.5 behind Tampa. Like, just leave us be.
Judge has a torn toe. If Judge is down, don't kick him while they're down.
Our manager gets tossed out of every game. Just like
he doesn't even want to be there.
What is it with big men in sports and toe injuries? I feel like it's like every center in basketball. It's like, well, his toe hurts, and now it's like Judge is a torn toe. Like, what is it with these big guys?
Like a new Achilles heel.
Yeah, seriously. Although maybe more embarrassing.
Yeah, as someone who works in sports, I have an answer for you. Physics.
Oh.
Physics,
yeah.
The whole triangle of the foot thing, right?
Yeah. Force equals mass times acceleration. It's just.
Oh, wow,
Chase.
So what you're telling us is we need to start doing some toe exercises.
And Chase, what is
exactly
your role in sports again?
I mostly do marketing and sales.
Physics.
I heard you were Sean Payton's right-hand man.
Depended on the
Yeah,
night.
but that's why I'm moving back to Colorado.
Sean Payton stole your playbook, right? That you had the green playbook that had all the plays in. Sean Payton stole it.
That's exactly right. He did that after we won the Super Bowl. I don't know why I gave him that.
Well, Devin and Chase, thank you for joining us tonight. Mets fan, Yankees fan. Before we dive into American Mash and Grain and everything about what you guys are doing, we are a bourbon and baseball podcast. We usually start our baseball portion with trivia, but we're going to start our bourbon and whiskey portion this week with trivia. So you're both Yankees fans and Mets fans. So there was a pitcher who played for both the Yankees and the Mets.
David Wells.
You gotta let me answer the question first. Ask the question first, Devin.
We'll start over, and then I'll answer, so I can seem smart.
So there's a pitcher who's played for both the Yankees and the Mets who is in the top 50 for pitcher wins for both teams. Who is it?
David Wells.
Whoa!
Great job.
It just came to me, guys.
Devin, you get an answer? Is it David Wells?
I think it's David Wells, yeah.
And Michael Burns, do you have an answer?
Pedro Martinez.
Pedro Martinez. He never played for the Yankees.
I know, it was a joke.
Oh, okay. Hilarious.
Okay. That's the
Hilarious.
You got 50% of it correct. His name was David. but his last name is Cohn. And he
Oh, I thought we
you
knew
know
the
what? And that's
answer
what
was
I-
David
and that's
Wells.
what I
I thought it was.
That's what I meant. Is
That's
David
what you
Cohn,
meant?
not David Wells. David Wells was the big guy with the mustache, right?
the big
Oh,
guy. He
yeah.
threw a perfect game.
Well, so
I
did
just
Cohn
found out
for the
recently-
Yankees, right?
Yeah, and David Wells and Cohn did for the Yankees, but David Wells was actually drunk when he did it. I just saw that on Instagram.
And this is a bourbon
Yeah,
and
there-
baseball podcast.
and
so
there
that
is your
really
full
you should ask a
circle.
question about him.
And there's your full circle. But yeah, David Cohn has 81 wins with the Mets. That is ninth all time. And the New York Yankees, he's got 64 wins, but they're a more decorated and longer franchise, so that's only 40th on the list.
I thought you'd gotten Dave. I thought it was David Wells. Like the way you reacted, Brandon, that he got the answer right away. So.
Yeah,
Well, and
that's how I took it.
what I think. You know what I think it is, Brandon, is that I knew it was David Cohn, but I think I saw this. Was the thing that you saw online? Was it about like SNL?
Yes.
Because like Jimmy Fallon had
Yeah.
was drinking until like 5 o'clock in the morning with David Wells, right?
Yes,
And then
and
yeah,
then
and
he had
then
to
he
pitch at
went.
1:30.
He pitched at 1:30 and pitched a perfect game. So I think. I knew it was David Cohn, but I had the same David Wells drunk trivia in my head.
Just on the same wavelengths here. Well, thank you again, gentlemen, for joining us. American Mash and Grain, you guys are a website, really. That's where you've started. Can you tell us how you came together? I hear it is on a kindergarten park bench.
Yeah, so I'll give you my best rendition of the story. So Devin and I, we met in kindergarten, and I had already been there for preschool, so I fancied myself kind of this old vet in our school, our elementary school. I kind of knew my way around the playground. And this new kid showed up at school, and I didn't like him so much. And we got into a bit of a disagreement. And at our school, when you get in trouble, you have to sit on a bench facing all of the kids, enjoying the recess, and just watch them have fun while you sit there next to the teacher. Devin and I got benched together and decided we had a couple things in common. We both like Power Rangers, big apple juice kind of guys. And the rest is history. I've been great friends ever since. I'm really excited personally that we will be back living in the same state for the first time in, oh my God, 8
Come on,
years.
Mr. Physics. No, way more than that. We haven't lived in this.
How old am I?
You're 34.
Oh my God, no,
we haven't
Jesus.
lived in the same state since we were 18. So try that one again.
That's 16 years.
All right, 16. Let me just count them out. 16 years.
So before we jump into that, I have the most important and the biggest question you guys are going to answer. Which is the best Power Ranger?
I was a big Billy guy, Blue.
Really?
I don't know who it was. I was really, and I'm pretty sure it was Billy. Someone will
Yeah,
fact
it's
check
Billy.
me and tell me. I was a big fan of all like the nerdy characters. So I was
Yeah.
like, Donatello was my Ninja Turtle. Egon was my my Ghostbuster. Billy was my Power Ranger.
That's actually true. I never.
I would have thought
tracked that.
Jason or Tommy.
Yeah, well, to be fair, in terms of the costumes that we owned, Chase.
Oh, I was
Chase
red.
Was Jason? He had the red Power Ranger.
I was Jason. I had red.
I
Yeah,
had
that's
the
true.
blue, which I think
You did
if
have
we're diving deep into therapy here, that's probably why Chase liked the blue so much because it was mine.
Yeah.
Um,
Envy.
Yeah.
The problem with being a twin, like I am, is that you're never satisfied. Like, you want what other people have, right? You're just accustomed to not getting what you want. So that's probably what
yeah,
it was.
especially when you're the twin with Keeley.
I am. Yeah. Yeah. No, I have a wildly successful twin sister. It has left no traumatic experiences in my life, so things are good.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, that was the most important question. We're doing therapy and a
There
podcast
you
all
go.
in one. But you said you're about to move to Colorado, right? Where have you been? What have you been up to?
Yeah, so I moved around a fair bit. Been in New Orleans the last 4.5 years or so.
Nolans?
What?
I said Nolans.
Collins.
Nolans. Yeah. No, I stick to the New Orleans. We get all the R's and everything in there, at least when I say it. Moved down here for a job. I was working for the Saints and Pelicans when I came down here. No longer with them. Great organization. My big regret, and it's not my fault, but the damn no call was a bit of a heartbreaking thing to live through. But excited to get back to Colorado.
Yeah, and Devin, that's where you're at right now. Is that where you guys are going to bring American Mash and Grain all together, all in one?
Yeah. So American Mash and Grain started back in 2020, really at the dawn of the pandemic. At that point, I was living in Brooklyn, New York. Chase was in Nollins. And yeah, I think my wife and I, at some point during the pandemic, we lived in New York for 15 years. It's the greatest city in the world. I love it so much. I miss it dearly. But, we were paying a boatload in rent. We had a baby, so we had a little, girl that was with us now. And we were in the middle of a pandemic, and we just realized we're not enjoying this city the same way we did when we were in our 20s. So we decided we wanted to get out of the city. I knew Chase and his wife were eventually going to settle and put down roots in Colorado. My whole family's from the East Coast. My wife's whole family is from the West Coast. So we sort of landed on Colorado as a nice middle point. So everybody would have to travel to get to us. Now, being in Colorado with no family and a 4-year-old, I've constantly questioned that choice of being so far away from family. But
I can understand that one fully.
Yeah, but no, it's a great place, and with the plans that Chase and I have for growing American Mash and Grain, being in a place like Colorado that has such an appreciation for craft products, especially beverage alcohol, the craft beer movement is and was huge here. Colorado has some of the greatest craft distilleries in the country, and we also have access to beautifully grown grain here in Colorado. So if we're able to grow this company the way we want and eventually start making product ourselves, which is part of the future plans, being able to locally source incredible grain, here in Colorado was important as well. So it just checked a lot of boxes. So I moved out here last August in 2022. And yeah, I'm excited to finally share the same state with Chase for the first time since we graduated high school.
Wow, that's awesome.
How have you guys communicated since? What's your just cell phone and text? Or?
Mostly digs. Mostly just like putting each other down.
That's what we found out the first 14 minutes of this podcast.
I think one of the amazing things about this endeavor for American Mash and Grain really has been, I don't want to say reconnecting because we didn't lose touch. We've always been in pretty good communication, but we reconnected in a regular communication way. So texting a lot more frequently, random phone calls, just keeping up with the lives. We get to have awesome conversations with people like yourselves that, even though it's not just one-on-one, we're constantly in these kind of video call kind of situations. And that was honestly one of my personal big motivators for taking the leap into it. Maybe we pause on that conversation. I'll give you the full story later, but was really it was the middle of the pandemic, and I was looking for a way to spend more time hanging out with my friend.
That's awesome. And that's kind of how Michael and I met, was through whiskey and the pandemic. Not in the same way where we went to middle school together, but we bonded on being Cubs fans. We loved whiskey and bourbon, and we met. And then I decided I was going to move away and take a new job.
Yeah, right as we became, did we just become best friends? He said, yup, and I'm moving.
You just scared me away. But we won't talk too much about us. We want to highlight you guys. So you guys have a lot of these in-depth articles on your website, and for listeners and viewers who haven't checked it out, you need to. And when I say very in-depth, I mean we're talking. You could probably publish a booklet of these, and you'd have multiple different chapters of each distillery. How do you format that, and how long does a process of that just take?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Chase. When we first started the website, I think we wanted to be a little bit different. At least that was important to me, was to not just come out and do the same thing everybody was doing. And I think something that we noticed was that if you looked on the internet and you looked up some of these craft brands, most of what you saw on the internet was tasting notes, which are subjective in the first place. But if they wrote anything about the actual distillery, you maybe got a paragraph or two at most. There weren't a lot of places that were really diving deep into the background, the history, the process philosophy, and all of that go into it. And I had worked for a couple craft distilleries at that point already. My first job in the industry was working as a New York City brand ambassador for Wiggle Whiskey out in Pittsburgh. So they hired me to show up and go to liquor stores and go to restaurants and stuff and do tasting events and things like that. And then I found myself working as a tour guide at Kings County Distillery in Brooklyn, where I was living. So I had really seen what goes in, like all the hard work, all the challenges and the sacrifices that go into making these products. And I had also, because I had to represent these brands in a very specific way, I really had to internalize their story. And their stories were so compelling, and I just knew that, there were other compelling stories out there. So it was Chase, who has spent most of his professional life working in brand storytelling, and I had sort of accumulated this more whiskey-specific knowledge. That's how we sort of decided to, let's join our expertise, and let's tell these longer, in-depth, holistic stories about these distilleries. Now, in terms of the process that goes into that, Chase and I will spend, a few days researching these distilleries. I was really motivated by, this is stupid. I was really motivated by the YouTube show Hot Ones.
Oh, yeah.
I was always so impressed when he would ask these people questions that clearly they had never been asked before. Because I knew we were going to ask the same questions that everybody asked. What kind of barrels do you use? And, where's your still from? And blah, 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 blah. Which are super important. And Chase will probably say that I make sure those questions are asked. But I also wanted to try to go deeper than that and really try to get at part of their story that maybe somebody else has missed or somebody else has forgotten to tell. So we usually end up with about 4 pages of questions between the two of us. We will hop on a Zoom call or a phone call the day before, and we'll go through our list question by question. And oftentimes Chase will help me with my questions. He'll be like, these 2 questions are kind of similar, or I like that, but maybe we rephrase it like this. And I try to do the same for his questions. And then we tell the distilleries, we say, block off 2 hours because we're going to talk about some stuff. And for the most part, 2 hours is enough time. And occasionally it hasn't been, and we've gone a little bit over. I'm sure that you've probably experienced this, and you're experiencing it right now with me. That some people in this industry are very long-winded. But yeah, that's sort of the process. We sit down, we talk, and then for a while I was writing the articles, and then eventually we wised up and hired a much better writer than me. Her name is Megan Swanson, and she's the head writer for the website and an incredible storyteller, and we're lucky to have her.
Yeah, your stuff is fantastic. I noticed that she's done stuff. I've noticed you've had some articles as well. I even noticed that you started implementing something that John mentioned in Dad's Drinking Bourbon, and that's where I wanted to tie this in, is this all came together, this podcast, interviewing you guys, because of Instagram Live. I was live randomly on Instagram on a Friday night, and Devin jumped in on the brand page, Instagram, into the live chat, and I had a spot open, so I just hit the invite button. I started inviting people I had never met, never talked to before, and you accepted. So graciously, thank you. But you were talking, and I was just like, I've heard your voice before. And it was Dad's Drinking Bourbon, and we were able to make that connection. But I remember that John mentioned something about Wikipedia, and you guys kind of being the whiskey Wikipedia when it comes to the craft distilleries. and you've already implemented that little, like, I think you called it the clips or
The cut.
the cut. That's what it was.
Yeah, it was really smart, and something that I feel like had been dancing around for a while, but when John mentioned it, it was like, oh yeah, that's how we should do it. So we're slowly getting all of our articles updated to feature the cut. So right at the top of the article, you'll get all of the like most important information that every like super whiskey nerd wants to know, before diving into this 7-page article.
Oh, they're really in depth and they're worth a read. If you haven't checked it out, like I mentioned, go check them out, and that's mashandgrain.com, correct?
Yes.
You said you were in 2020. What got you guys into whiskey in the first place? Did you guys' dads drink growing up, or how did you guys' whiskey adventure start?
I'll give my easy answer, which is Devin. Listen, I'm.
Is that a good influence at the correct age?
Yeah,
Was it a good influence or bad influence?
I kind of an equal opportunist when it comes to drinking. I like everything, but was a big beer guy, big craft beer guy, and I liked whiskey a lot. But I never really like paid that much attention to it until Devin started going down the rabbit hole. And like many things in my life, when Devin starts to go down a rabbit hole, I fall down that rabbit hole. So. Yes. So I'll turn it over to him to kind of chronicle his kind of falling in love with whiskey. But yeah, really, it's all his fault.
Yeah, a lot.
So he was all about the tasting notes, and you were like, "This tastes like alcohol."
I was like, I need a second glass before I give you my notes.
Well, I'll get to that part a little bit about tasting notes at the tail end of this, but yeah. So what I usually say is that I've always been a person who appreciates whiskey. When we were in high school, I know that everybody's going to like clutch their pearls about that, but we were drinking in high school.
What?
I know. And you know what? And it
Oh,
wasn't legal. And I'm here to say we're sorry, But yeah, when we were drinking in high school, Chase and the rest of our friends, I would say, were much more your typical high school drinkers. They were drinking the cheap beer that was easy for us to get our hands on and afford. Natty Ice, Milwaukee Beast, Keystone. If we were feeling fancy, Coors. And I've always been a big guy. I'm 6'3". I've always had a pretty decent tolerance for alcohol, and it got early on. I was like, all right, well, I could drink 16 Natty Ices, or I could pour like a little bit of Jack Daniels into this solo cup every 45 minutes or an hour or so, and I can like be pretty good in a couple hours while we're playing beer pong. So that's what I did. I was much quicker to pour a little bit of whiskey into a solo cup and have that on the side while drinking these watered down beers, and that's kind of where it started, but that's kind of where it stayed for a long time too. In 2016 or 2017, I can't remember, my wife and I went to Ireland for a vacation. We were supposed to go to Trinity College, but we got there super early, and we noticed that the Irish Whiskey Museum was right across the street. So we walked over. There just happened to be a tour that was about to start, so we hopped on that tour, and that tour really changed my life in a big way. I fell in love with the history of Irish whiskey, with the process of how whiskey was made, which before that point I had no idea. We were super drunk for our tour of Trinity College, which was fun. I just have a statue bust of Socrates just staring at me like very judgingly, and I was like, why? That's a philosophy joke for those listening. I spent the rest of that vacation drinking as much Irish whiskey as I could get my hands on. I really fell in love with Powers, which I felt like was a slightly better version of Jameson, and really fell in love with single malts and with single pot still whiskey like Redbreast and Writer's Tears, and came back to America and just like Chase said, I tumbled down a rabbit hole. I wanted to know not just about Irish whiskey. I wanted to know about Scotch. I wanted to know about bourbon, rye, everything. Found myself getting some certifications. I'm an executive bourbon steward through the Stave and Thief Society out of Moonshine University in Kentucky.
It's awesome.
I'm a level 2 award recipient with distinction from the WSET, the Wine and Spirits Education Trust in the UK. And like I said, I started working sort of in a peripheral way for different craft distilleries. After we started American Mash and Grain, I actually took over as the tour and events manager at Kings County Distillery for a little less than a year. So awesome. I ran that tour program. I helped them bring tours back in person to that distillery during the pandemic. And yeah, I had been working in film and television and just truly hating that so much and wanting a way to get out of it. And then, you know, all these little jobs, and then American Mash and Grain I saw as like my way out. So that's how I got into it. Basically, pulled Chase in with me, and you know, he's become quite the sophisticated, you know, aficionado now. So much so that you know, when we need to do tasting notes for the website, he can't help me because he's already finished all the samples before we get to that point. So.
Oh, I was supposed to taste these?
The number of times
they tasted good.
The number of times
they tasted good.
That I've reached out to Chase and be like, "Hey, should we hop on a call?" Or like, "Do you want to discuss these whiskeys for tasting notes?" And he's like, "Oh, I finished those weeks ago." And I'm like, "Cool." And then
Chase, he's making you sound like a real alcoholic, you know, rather than an aficionado.
Yeah, you know, is there much of a difference though?
No.
You know, I think we're splitting hairs. You know, like
one just
you can't
has
be an aficionado
awards.
without trying enough whiskey. So
right.
One calls it an art. One calls it the other's drinking. You know.
Yeah.
So you mentioned down the road, the ultimate goal is to start making your own product. You have your own product out right now, but that is a blend. Borrowed Page. When was first volume? Last year in September or in the summer?
Yeah, last summer.
And Volume 2 just came out. Volume 1 last year won awards at International Wine and Spirits Competition, San Francisco World Spirits Competition. Now we're on to Volume 2. What is the primary difference from 1 to 2 for those listeners who haven't dove into your product yet?
Yeah, you know, when we first started talking about Borrowed Page as a concept, even before we had a name for it, one, we really wanted it to be a platform that highlighted and celebrated the different craft distilleries that were participating in the blend, right? We wanted this kind of idea that it's not just about the final product, it's equally about, if not more about the different people who are coming together maybe for the first time to create a unique expression of American whiskey. To that end, that meant that Borrowed Page is always going to be different volume over volume. You know, there's not an ambition here for us to recreate or have some consistency in product. We want every volume to be kind of a new concept and a new idea that we're exploring within the expanding bounds of what American whiskey can and should be. You know, with volume 1, you know, there was a bit of, we didn't know if anyone was going to agree to do this with us. So I wouldn't say there was this kind of master plan, so to speak, about how we want to pull these pieces together. It was more just reaching out to people who we had interviewed on the website, who we really believed in what they were doing and why they were doing it and the product they were putting out there. And then kind of in this like blind faith that we could find a way to make it work. And then so you know, to that end, for volume 1, we had 4 distilleries. We had 2 bourbons, and one out of Columbus, Ohio, for Watershed Distillery. They were actually the first distillery to kind of officially agree to do it. Fun fact, Greg Lehman, who started Watershed Distillery, his dad was my wife's high school volleyball coach. So, you know, a classic Ohio story, small town all around kind of thing. And then we had Spirits of French Lick with Alan Bishop out of Indiana. And, you know, in true Alan fashion, you know, when we talked to all these distilleries, we wanted to get a good representation of the product. And he said, screw that. I'm going to give you a bunch of random stuff. I'm going to test your palates. I'm going to really challenge you guys here. And didn't, I wouldn't say that what we wound up with from them was necessarily a perfect example of their Lee Sinclair bourbon, but it's an amazing whiskey. We had Wiggle Monongahela Rye out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Again, tying back to Devin's early days as a brand ambassador. And then we wanted something that would really kind of push the bounds of what people think of American whiskey, right? We had some bourbons, we had a rye. It's not that kind of revolutionary of a thing, but we wanted to pull in a single malt, and specifically we wanted to work with Whiskey Delback in their mesquite smoked single malt because it was something that was going to be completely different, right? We didn't know if we could manage mesquite smoke in the volume in the blend at all, but we knew for a fact that if we tried, we would be kind of honoring this overall mission of trying to expand the definition of American whiskey and just experimenting with things. I've been talking for a while. I'll kick it over to Devin to talk more in depth about Volume 2. But, spoilers, there's no bourbon in it.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. I have the mash written down. 3 different distilleries, right? But 4 different types of whiskey within that. What made you guys go away from the bourbon? Is it because the bourbon world is booming, but now we're into as Ryan, as we'll jump into that as well, is calling this year the year of the American single malt?
Yeah, I think to sort of close the book on Volume 1, I think Chase and I still feel like, why is anybody saying yes to us for these things? But, it really works. And, thanks for bringing up the awards that it won at IWSC in San Francisco. But it really works. It's an incredible whiskey. It's big, it's bold, it's cask strength. And like Chase said, we really want to make sure that every release of Borrowed Page is different from the previous one. And I think we started coming up with the concept for Volume 2 while we were on the flight back home from blending Volume 1 in Kentucky. And I think what really kicked off Volume 2 was that we agreed no bourbon. And the reason for that is that, we're sort of planting our flag in the American whiskey realm. And American whiskey being this sort of very vague catch-all term for any American-made whiskey that doesn't fit one of the TTB's standards for the, individual grain products. So, staying in the American whiskey realm, American whiskey has had kind of a bad connotation for a long time. A lot of people see the word American whiskey or blended American whiskey, and they assume this is a cheap product made with cheap whiskey, blended with neutral grain spirit to create a lighter product that's going to cost you, $12 or $15 at the liquor store. This is not a, quality thing. And there's a lot of reasons for that I won't, bore your listeners with, post-prohibition and, the whole changing of palates in the 60s and 70s. But we feel like the American craft movement has already done a lot to sort of fight back against that connotation or that taboo nature for the term American whiskey, because you have a lot of great craft products out there, craft distilleries that are producing American whiskeys or blended whiskeys. The couple that come to my mind right away are Stolen Wolf. They came out the gates with a blended whiskey. Few Spirits in Evanston has an American whiskey. And while we feel like these craft producers have done a lot of incredible work in sort of helping to change the connotation behind the term American whiskey, a lot of what you're seeing out there is really bourbon and rye blends, right? You're taking a young bourbon that's maybe not quite ready. You're taking a similarly young but maybe more ready rye. You're blending them together and you're creating a great product. And there's nothing wrong with that. But with bourbon making up 58% of Volume 1 and Monongahela Rye being a large majority of the rest, with just that mesquite smoked single malt being that little curveball in there, pun intended, I guess, for this show, we just decided no bourbon was the mission statement for Volume 2, just to push the envelope for what American whiskey is. So yeah, 3 different distilleries, 4 different kinds of whiskey, like you said. We've got 2 different rye barrels in here from Mammoth Distilling up in northern Michigan. We have 2 different American single malts in this blend from Virginia Distillery Company. One that was aged in a first fill Oloroso sherry cask. One that was aged in a first fill red wine cuvee cask. And then finally we have a single pot still whiskey from Talnua in Arvada, Colorado. So 3 very interesting styles of whiskey. 4 different whiskeys altogether, and I think an incredible product that is very different from Volume 1.
So you've mentioned 3 different distilleries. Are these all that you have featured on your website? Is that what you guys are hoping to do, is poor choice of words there, is highlight
Use the partnership.
Use the partnership, but highlight the distilleries and their juice that you've already talked about on your website and put it together to make it something of your own.
Yeah, I mean, everything for us starts with the story, right? It's kind of down to the core of who we are and how we approach things. So everyone who's participating in Borrow Page, both Volume 1 and Volume 2, first started as a conversation we had with them for the purpose of releasing their story on our website. In many ways, we've interviewed a lot of great distilleries, great craft producers. We've told a lot of great stories. We can't include them all on Borrowed Page, but in many ways, for us, it's a way of figuring out, what are they all about, and trying to create a blend that best represents, their best qualities, and using the things about them and marrying it with other craft distilleries to help kind of move the conversation forward. It's Borrowed Page for us is just as much about trying to promote these independent craft producers and trying to introduce people from other pockets across the U.S. to different distilleries they may or may not have heard of. And so we really do want to start with everyone who's in Borrowed Page who's on the website. One things I really love about Borrowed Page is, for example, if you're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you're familiar with who Wiggle is, but you may not know who Whiskey of Dalbec is. You may not know who Watershed was. And if you're a fan of Wiggle and you learn about Borrowed Page, you might use that as an avenue then to learn more about Watershed or Whiskey of Dalbec or Spirits of French Lick. And same thing for Volume 2. And so for us, it all starts with the website. It all starts with kind of what is the story? Why are they doing that? What's their purpose? What's their philosophy?
Yeah, that's so with the different stories of the distilleries and it all coming together. Where's the story of Borrowed Page, the name?
It's a bit of a journey, and Borrowed Page was not the original name.
No,
I mean, I think it fits perfect. You're kind of borrowing.
Yes.
So I totally get it. I love it. Mm-hmm. It totally makes sense for what you guys are doing. But
yeah. No, we appreciate it. Honestly, it was a last-minute switch. For anyone who has tried to work with the trademarking and everything, it is a pain in the ass. Like, everything is taken, especially if you try and go with one-word names, right? I'm pretty sure if you go to the dictionary, 90% of those words are trademarked for beverage alcohol.
The Commanders, the Washington Commanders.
The Washington Commanders, yes, exactly. Baseball, we can go with the Guardians, the Cleveland Guardians.
Yeah.
They're struggling still.
Well, yeah, you're right, but they were the roller derby team. No one checked the trademarking ahead of time, so they wound up with that payout. So we can do a trademarking baseball reference. This is about as good as I can get for. No, so the original working name was going to be Anthology. Right, it was all part of this kind of serial storytelling motif. We wanted to lean on something from the storytelling kind of thematic, and to the point, we submitted the trademark. We were calling it we were fully committed on that, and we ended up getting a law firm to help finalize the trademarking and really push through the licensing that we need. And it came out that some big company had a wine named Anthology. It's probably defensible that it's wine, it's not whiskey, but it's a litigious organization, so you'd have to spend some money to try and protect it. I might be exaggerating, but not by much. We probably submitted 100 names to try and get it.
And does that cost money every time to
I
submit?
mean, not
Well, it costs
not every time.
hours with the lawyer, you know.
The lawyers, yeah, it's paid by the hour. And honestly, the process kind of just it beat us down, and to the point that like we wound up on a name that like we didn't love it, but it was good enough, which was Forward, not like the forward of a book. So like using the bottle as kind of like an introductory story to these distilleries. So a bit heady perhaps, but like that's what we were working with. And then we submitted the trademark, and it was all looking good. And then I was kind of like it didn't sit well with me. And I was out at a bar in New Orleans, Coup de Browns. If anyone's in New Orleans bar, in New Orleans listening to this, that's the bar I was at. Talking to our head writer, Megan Swanson. I was just like, what about Borrowed Page? Just kind of shot in the dark. Text Devin at the bar. We've already fully submitted for the trademarking on Forward at this point. And he's like, yeah, I like that better. And we just pivoted 180, made the label. And
Which I think we
off to the races.
we have. I think we have the trademark for Forward still.
I
think so. I think
Maybe
I
that's
don't know.
when you start creating your own stuff. Soon,
I don't know. I mean, none of
hopefully.
us really liked it that much.
We're not going to do Forward.
But borrow.
But someone else might, and they're going to come to you to buy it from you. So that's the investment right there still.
They tell us a
if
good
you
story.
want to make an offer on the Forward trademark, info@mashandgrain.com. We're currently receiving offers.
Again, and Forward spelled like forward of a book, but it's like also like moving the story of American whiskey forward. It was like, yeah, it was too heady for sure. If you give us a good story, we'll give it to you for free. I'm saying that right now. Chase is gonna shoot laser beams at
there it is. The best story gets the trademark.
The best
we should
story.
probably confirm that we actually have legal right to that trademark before we make a verbal agreement or verbal offer.
So, what about the label on the bottle itself? How did you guys come to that?
I love the label.
Yeah.
I'll start, and then Chase, I'll let you take it over because you did so much for this label.
Yeah.
But, so we have Borrow Page. I knew we wanted it to stand out. That's why we have it sort of, is it embossed? It's embossed, right? When it's sort of lifted up off the thing, debossed when it's in. Mm-hmm. That's why it's embossed with the gold foil on it, so it really popped. We knew we wanted to have the distillery's logos front and center. For the full format bottle, that is the case. So you can see, like for Volume 1 here, everybody's logo is right here on the front of the label. For the 375s that we came out with for Volume 2, they are sort of relegated to the back just because of space issues.
Calling us out for the 375 milliliter.
But yeah, it's we were working with it. We wanted it to have that sort of like torn page look to it, which is why it sort of has that kind of ripped edges thing. And we knew we wanted it to have a little bit of texture, but there was definitely something missing. And then Chase had this incredible idea to really make that label pop. So I'll let him finish that off.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's one of those things you spend a lot of time thinking about concepts, looking at options, and then like when it clicks, it just everything kind of falls in line. You're off to the races, and you're like, well, why the hell did we spend so much time looking at bad ideas first? So the concept is that we are a platform that wants to celebrate craft whiskey and elevate the profile of craft whiskey. To that end, we wanted something that the label that kind of represented craft and nature. So I like this idea of hand drawn, right? Something that's not machine proof, sterile, kind of every right angles, clean. Like I do like that aesthetic, but it's not necessarily craft as I think about it. There's an element of something that's an idea that's still being kind of put together, that's a little bit incomplete, but kind of beautiful in the endeavor of making it a complete picture. So I really wanted this hand-drawn kind of idea to come to life. Ultimately, I spent a lot of time looking for artists, went on Upwork, talked to a lot of people. I like this kind of sketchy, single line, almost kind of nature to it. And finally, I found this artist named Josh Duncan, who's doing just amazing kind of ink drawings, simple line work, and he was here in New Orleans. And I shot him an email with kind of a concept about different kind of whiskey motifs. Ultimately, what we landed on for the bottle is kind of a drawing, a representation of the life cycle of creating whiskey. Right, to create craft whiskey, it takes farmers, it takes distillers, the fermentation process. It takes warehouse managers with the barrels, So you really get kind of the alpha and omega in this kind of drawn way, but it's not fully rendered. And I like that because in many ways, craft whiskeys, it's still everyone who we talk to is still refining their process. Mm-hmm. They're still looking for new ways to push the boundaries. No one has just a recipe that's like, all right, our goal today is just make as much of this one thing as possible. It is still very much about trying to move the conversation forward. So I kind of like that sketchy nature of it.
Yeah, it jumps out right away. I will say that. Like if I walked up to a grocery store shelf or a liquor store shelf and saw this on there, that jumps out more than just your normal straight cut, bold face lines. This has something that has character to it that draws your eye to it, and it's fantastic. Now, I saw on a YouTube video there's a sticker on here, and there's a special part to that sticker, correct?
A bit of an Easter egg under there, yeah.
I don't want to ruin the sticker, though, guys.
It's all part of the marketing genius of the company. It has nothing to do with TTB regulations and general impatience to get legal approval on a label.
While you're gingerly taking that sticker off, I'll say too the sketch is perfect. Like Chase says, it sort of starts on the left hand side with the grains growing, and then you've got this big fermenter. I love that you just have this sort of shadowy distiller that's kind of ambiguous, and you've got this sort of pot column hybrid thing. All of it is like this could be anybody on this label, right? This could be anybody anywhere making this whiskey, and you'll notice too, like a textural element. The borrowed page is embossed, but the drawing is debossed. It's actually pressed into the paper, so it gives it a little extra texture, but it also sort of tells a story that like this is the backbone. This is everything that went behind the whiskey that you're about to have, and then of course the whiskey in the bottle is the final part of it. So,
and speaking of that whiskey in the bottle, you blended this with a special person.
Yeah.
That's called a segue.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's that one dude, Ryan, who is massively famous on TikTok and on Instagram when it comes to the whiskey and bourbon world. Most of you listening who are whiskey aficionados or just love whiskey and are on either one of those platforms, you know who he is. So how did you get a hold of Ryan? How did he come to you guys? How did that all work? I remember an Instagram Live a couple of weeks ago, but I don't remember the answers, and I want our listeners to have the answers too.
So part of the cool thing about Borrowed Page is that we're going to bring in a new guest blender for each release as well. So not only is every release of Borrowed Page going to be working with different distilleries that we've previously featured on the website, blending different styles of whiskey together, we're also going to bring in a new guest blender for each release so that we are expanding the perspective and flavor profile and also expanding the story of craft whiskey, right? Because the distillers are only one part of it. They're an incredibly big part of it, but there's influencers. There's, Ann Dimick helped us with Volume 1. She had worked at Wild Turkey before. She had worked at Watershed. She now works for Ohio Liquor. We're talking with a number of other industry professionals to try to bring them in to be guest blenders for future releases. So it's also just expanding the audience and the realm of the craft whiskey movement by bringing in these other perspectives. With Ryan, he was just such a big supporter of Volume 1. I had sent him... I had seen this article from Uprocks that was about the top 10 or whatever whiskey influencers that you need to know.
Yeah.
And on there is obviously it's like the Whiskey Gal and Urban Bourbonist and Hood Sommelier and that one dude Ryan. So basically I took that entire list, reached out to all of them was like, let me send you samples. And because we were still very new and still are very new to this business, I sent them all like little 100 ml samples of the product. And so obviously I hadn't even done my due diligence.
Droppers.
Yeah, I hadn't even done my due diligence to see that what Ryan does is his, what he's famous for is the whole slam and sips thing. And obviously he's not going to slam and sip a 100 ml bottle of whiskey, but he reached out after.
Although, Ryan, if you're listening, spoof segment idea, you should actually try
Yeah.
and do that.
It's gonna shatter.
Well, he's shattered plenty of stuff, already. So.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
That's part of it.
But he reached out when he got it, and he was super complimentary. He really loved the whiskey. He's down in Florida, and he's a part of a lot of different culinary groups and whiskey groups in Florida, and I think he really tried to stretch that 100 ml sample as deep as he could. He shared it with a lot of people. So I just really appreciated that. I thought that was super cool of him to do that. So we got up the courage. We sent him a 100 ml, or a full-size bottle, I should say. We gave him the warning that there was a manufacturer issue with the toppers for Volume 1. Tappy forgot to glue the wood to the cork. So I'll actually show that off because I think... Yeah, there you go. So that happens a lot.
That's the worst.
It's for our first whiskey to go out there and to be getting a lot of DMs and emails about the cork was like didn't feel great.
My cork's stuck.
We got roasted by Fred Minnick over it. It's just such a
Hey.
gut-wrenching thing. It's just like it's such a distraction, right, from what we're trying to do here.
Right, but he was talking about you. He was talking about you.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Good. Still publicity.
Well, and he was definitely one to remind us of how important that was that he was talking about us. So
everyone has super glue at home.
I did. I told
I had to do it to Maker's Mark.
I told Ryan, I was like if you try to do a slam and sip of this bottle, like you're gonna rip that cork off. I know it. Like, can you please super glue that before you do it? He was nice enough to super glue the cork so that it wouldn't break apart when he did the review. But yeah, we saw a nice little response after he did slams and sips, and we were getting started on Volume 2. So I just reached out to him and was like, "Do you want to be a part of this next release?" And we were lucky enough that he said yes, very enthusiastically.
That's fantastic and awesome. Now, we have a bottle, and part of our podcast is we do reviews. We do a rating scale. Do you have some with you as well, Chase?
I have 1 and 2.
I don't.
He drank it all already. That's right. I shouldn't have asked.
But for good purpose, because I'm moving and I can't move all my whiskey, so I'm actually drinking through my whole bar. So it's.
I'm surprised there is a bar from the stories we've
It's
heard.
full of empty bottles right now. You don't see so well, but yeah, there they are.
So we're going to give this a little bit of a nose. Our review, what we like to say is we give our honest opinion. So we like it, we like it. We don't like it, we don't like it. I call Michael the Axeman because what we do is we have our own baseball rating scale where there's Hall of Fame. It's the top of the top. We have yet to rate a bourbon or a whiskey a Hall of Famer. So that's really high praise, and we've never done that. Next comes All-Star, right? Every team's got All-Stars on it. They're the best players on the team. Maybe not necessarily a Hall of Famer, but the potential to become one down the road. Next, behind that, is an everyday player. Baseball teams have players that are always in the lineup. That's a bottle that's always on your shelf, right? That's one that you're going to see it. You're going to want that. Once you finish it, you're going to grab another one.
Yeah, the difference between all-star and everyday player, though, is all-star you might keep to yourself, where the everyday player is good enough, but you're still going to share it with friends. The all-star, you're going to milk that bottle.
Especially Michael. Michael likes to just hoard his stuff.
Michael likes to milk all-stars. Got it.
Milk all-stars. You can milk anything with nipples, Greg.
So the next level after everyday player is a bench player, which what we try to say is not necessarily bad. There's each one has a tool. It could be a dessert bourbon. It could be something like that has a special, unique flavor, but maybe not something that you're going to destroy on a daily basis, or a bottle that you're going to savor, but
like
still one that has a unique.
Pinch hitter or a guy who comes in and plays once or twice a week. like Michael said, not everything that you're going to all the time, but when you want to mix things up, that's what you're pouring. And then final is a designate for assignment. And in baseball, that means you're Gary Sanchez. Get out of here. We don't want you on our team. So we did our homework beforehand. Normally we don't do this. Normally we taste it and nose it as we're on the episode. But
That's a pretty bold strategy.
it is.
And we've had some blinds sent to us too, where when we do it blind on the recording, and we've turned out well. I'm pretty proud of ourselves, of our nose and palates.
Yeah, those are fun to do just because you're like, what am I getting here? Like, is there smoke to this? Is there this? But right off the bat on the nose, I thought green apple. That was the first thing I said. And I thought peated. Like, I don't think this is peated, right? I know there's American single malt, but there's no peatiness to this.
This is volume 1 or volume 2 that you got?
This is volume 2.
Yeah, no
so this
smoke
is the one
in
with
here.
Ryan. So there was a peatiness to the nose to me. What did you get, Michael?
I immediately was smacked with like a walnut or like a walnut. I'm not good with my classification of nuts. I just know it smells like nuts a little bit. You know, walnuts or almonds, one of the two. But
Writing that one down for Instagram.
Not good with my classification of nuts. Got it.
Yes, but that's what I immediately got, like an almond or a walnut or a little bit like my wife loves to leave bananas on the counter that rot then eventually to make banana bread. So we constantly have that smell, and that's what I got strong first on that nose.
A rotten banana?
No,
It's
banana
very
bread.
sugary sweet. My wife also does that.
I always have to throw them away 9 times out of 10 before when the flies start hitting and they're pretty, black bananas and rotted. Yeah, but yeah, that's what I got on the nose, real strong at first.
I got a little bit of cereal, like a cornflakes.
Yeah. Yeah,
I get a lot of that with single malts, though. I noticed that my nose really jumps to cereal for some reason. On the palate, the first thing, I sat there while we were watching Inside Out with my daughter this evening, and I was like, what is this flavor? And it instantly popped in my head.
You asked her? You gave her a little bit?
I was
and
like,
asked
hey,
her?
Aubrey, you're 3.5 years old. What do you think this tastes like? Green apple Jolly Rancher. Like, specifically Jolly Rancher. It's got that, like, tangy rancher flavor.
Yeah,
Well, not
that's
rancher
my favorite
flavor,
one.
but- The green apple?
The green apple is my favorite Jolly Rancher, for sure.
That's what I'm comparing this to. So,
I will
There you
say,
go, sir.
too, to sort of digress off of the situation with your daughter, my daughter loves to nose whiskey. She hasn't tasted any yet, but her nose at 4 years...
we already found you drank in high school.
Well, and again, I already apologized for that, Brandon, but her nose at 4 years old is already pretty good.
Yeah?
So,
Mine just says oak.
yeah, she'll be like, is that marzipan? No. But no, she's very good at being like, that's sweet, or that's, that's a little spicy. Or even one time she said, like, that smells like flowers. And I was like, yeah, great job, kid.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
my wife, when she noses whiskey, after hearing us talk about all these great, pastries and fruits, and she takes one sip, she's like, "Yeah, you're full of shit." It smells like that. It smells like alcohol.
That's my favorite is when people come in and like, I'm getting like grandma's apple pie. I'm like, what is grandma's apple pie a little bit? Come on, let's calm down a little bit on these descriptions.
It's crazy, and that's what we love to always talk about, is everybody's got their own different palate, their own different notes that they can pull out of it, and that's what I think makes whiskey so unique and so fun, because something that I may think is fantastic, Michael may spit on, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So,
We've had Brandon All-Star one, and I DFA'd it.
Wow.
We
yeah.
So, but then we've also agreed and concurred on the same. But it's always fun to see how we vary on the same thing.
So, Michael, we are here. We've tasted it. We've sniffed it. I'm getting a long, I think, finish where I've got maple syrup to start, and then I get that rye spice towards the back where it starts to tingle. But I circled down right away. This is 110 proof. It doesn't drink like a 110 to me.
Oh no, not at all. I would guess this was like a bib more. like a 100 proofer at most, like 95. We talked to somebody who was like they told us the number was 94. That was like what Pappy does, I think. They told us 94 was the magic number, and I mean, this is what this tastes. The note I have is this is just like a buttery smoothness to this. Not a buttery flavor, but like the way it envelopes your mouth, and it's not thin. You don't drink it and it just goes right down your throat, and it's done. This thing envelopes your mouth. And we are bourbon and baseball, but we've done a couple of whiskeys and single malt and a couple scotches. And so I have a couple on my shelf, and I went and I think I did my own little tasting with this guy, and this guy was the most complex of them. It gave me an appreciation for it, because usually I'm on the bourbon side of things, but after drinking, what I call my go-to cheap American whiskey. This thing knocks its socks off. That thing was flat compared to that. I pulled in, had a little, that peatiness of what I call whiskey will have a little bit, but this was more of a roller coaster where I poured it in, had that buttery up front, had that spiciness in the middle there, and then just finished out with that I can talk and I keep tasting it rather than talking, have to take another sip. I've had this thing in front of me and still haven't crushed it because I don't have to. And so I think having done that review board I did, I would go to this one again. I would give this guy an everyday player.
And I, too, am going to go with an everyday player. I love the complexity. There's a roller coaster ride, so to speak, to this. I feel like you've got the American single malt up front, and then you start to pull in that rye. And then the flavor on the back end, to me, goes back to that American single malt. So you've got so many different directions, and you don't know where it's going. And each different sip, to me, I pull out something different. I get the rye from the Mammoth. I get the sherry a little bit from the Virginia. Very well done, gentlemen. Very well done. Everyday
Thank
player.
I appreciate
Happy to
it.
be on the field,
Every day.
More than I say for my actual athletic career, but glad I made it.
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about Volume 2, well, and I'll say too, like Chase and I have already mentioned that each volume of Borrowed Page is going to be different. What I think the goal is in terms of consistency is we want all of these releases to be bold. We want them to be dynamic, which is, I think, I'm glad to hear both of you describe it a little bit as like a roller coaster, because that means that those flavors are constantly changing and evolving and giving you something new from sip to sip. And that's what's interesting to us. We don't want to put out a release that's going to be one note or that's going to be flat. We want it to be bold. We want it to be big. We want it to challenge your ideas about what American whiskey can be, and I think both of them have succeeded in that. And I'm excited for you guys to eventually. You should try to grab a bottle of Volume 1 while it's still around, because the sad thing about
And where can we find that?
It's exclusively sold on our website, so mash the letter N grain.com. It's also available on a handful of influencer websites as well. Like you can buy our products at One Dude Ryan's website as well. I think it's also available at Cumming Whiskey. There might be a few other stores that are getting it online soon. But these are super limited release. They're extremely small batch. We made about 700 bottles of Volume 1. We made the same number, roughly, of bottles of Volume 2, but then we added around 300 bottles of that half size, the 375s. Once they're gone, they're gone. Like Chase said, we're not interested in recreating them. So it's part of the uniqueness, but also, somewhat sad that eventually there will be a time where you can't buy Volume 1 anymore. You can't buy Volume 2 anymore. That they're going to retire, from being everyday players.
Yeah.
And then they'll go into the booth and start broadcasting.
And they'll go into the booth. Yeah.
Two questions
I love
off
that.
of that.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Go ahead, Michael.
I was just gonna say I love that fact. You said it can be kind of sad that like when you find a single barrel that you love and you just Brandon used a term in a reel the other day. You're so sad or scared to finish it, but that's part of the whiskey world is you find that good bottle and everyone's always searching for that bottle again, and that's part of the fun, I think.
I was tasting.
So, go ahead, Brandon.
So before Brandon goes, I work as a distiller at Denver Distillery here in Colorado.
Oh, awesome.
And I also bartend there on Saturday nights. Right now, Denver Distillery is the only bar in the world that has borrowed page behind the bar. I can't sell it to you, but if you like convince me that you're like a for real whiskey person, I will taste you on it for free. So I tasted some people on this a couple weeks ago at the bar, and somebody just loved Volume 1 so much. They were like, this is the greatest whiskey I've ever had. I'm not just saying that to like, to my own horn. But I was like, yeah, man, like get a bottle. Like, I don't know how much longer they're going to last. And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, once this is gone, like we're not going to recreate it. And he was like, you're not? And he spent like 20 minutes trying to convince me that like I shouldn't do anything else but try to recreate Volume 1. He was like, this is your money right here. he's like, you got to do this.
This is your forward. He's like, just create this. This is like the one line. This is called forward, and then the rest are borrowed page. Man, come on.
I could see the panic in his eyes. Like,
I hope he bought a couple bottles. So the questions I was going to join and jump in with that. Hopefully you've set some aside, so there will always be one bottle of each, or at least two bottles, one for each of you. Second question is, so we're through 2 volumes. When's number 3?
There's definitely a couple set aside. I have bottle 1 of both Volume 1 and 2 on the top of my bar. Eventually, I will probably get like a shadow box or something made, at least for Volume 1. Chase had bottle 2 of Volume 1. He better still have it. I have his bottle 2 of Volume 2 at my house. There you go.
Look, only full bottle on the bar.
There it is.
Goodness, proof of life.
And I have a couple bottles of Volume 1, and I think probably once I start seeing the sales numbers go, and I'm like, we're down to like sub 100 of these bottles, I'll probably swoop in and maybe buy another case or something, just so that like I can taste people on it for a little bit longer. But yeah, right now I have to keep the stock at Denver Distillery, where it is, because those bottles keep getting depleted pretty quickly.
Well, that's good news. Awesome. That means people are asking for it or accepting the samples.
Yeah.
So don't skirt my other question. Where's Volume 3, or when is Volume 3?
When is Volume 3?
The when is it?
Go ahead, Chase.
Yeah, the when's a little unknown at the time. So Devin and I, we've gone through the concepting phase, right? We have kind of 3 and 4 conceptually figured out. We have not talked to the distilleries yet, and we can tease it a little bit more. But that's as far as we are right now. Our hope is to release Volume 3 at a minimum before the end of the year. We did 1 release in 2022. We're looking to do 2 releases in 2023, and then kind of watch the market. See, we don't want to scale too fast. Looking at kind of our cash flow and everything for the business venture. So my guess at this moment in time would be late Q3, early Q4 of 2023. But it's kind of a shot in the dark, and we don't know which of the 2 concepts we have in store is going to be 3 and which is 4 yet.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, it keeps you moving forward for sure, and I'm sure that's a fun process, right? Trying to develop and conceptualize this.
Yeah, I'm really.
Yeah, that's the fun bit. That way, that's done. Everything, the logistics piece.
Yeah, that's where I start to lose hair, and annoy Chase to no end. Is all the rest of it.
That's why we're
at. Yeah, luckily, I mean, I still got something going on, but
Got some nice flow.
But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for what my primary hope for what Volume 3 is. I'm really, really excited about it. The teaser that I have been giving out, so you're not the first person, so sorry about that.
It's okay.
But the teaser that I've been giving people about Volume 3 is, if we go with the concept that is my favorite for the next release, which is not to say that it's better or worse than the other idea we have, it would require a distillery that has previously said no to us for Borrowed Page to come back to the table and say yes because of what the concept is this time. So really excited about that if we can pull it off. And then, yeah, like, the hope is that eventually we'll get to a point where Borrowed Page is sort of like a Booker's or something like that. It comes out 3 or 4 times a year. Maybe like quarterly, a new release comes out. Where we're at right now is a little bit of a bottleneck, cash flow wise, like Chase said. You know, we don't really make any money off of Borrowed Page. That's not really what the point of the project was anyway. But every dime that we made off of Volume 1 helped pay for Volume 2. So if you want to see Volume 3 come out sooner rather than later, go out there and buy Borrowed Page Volume 1 and Volume 2. Help us get some extra, dollars in the bank so that we can get that product out to you, sooner. That's what I'll say.
So again, 2 things off of that, because we're just branching off. One thing, I'm totally cutting off you're not the first person, and I'm just going to get rid of not in the editing process. So it's just going to say you're the first person to hear this. Just kidding. And then the second part is, so you mentioned that you have had distilleries say no to you. What's the success rate? Like, when you approach distilleries, how is the response usually when it comes to asking them about the project and about the concept?
We have been told no twice. And I'll tell you without telling you who they are, because I'm still incredibly confident that I'm going to get them eventually. That's just the kind of person that I am.
Yes. It's like Barney from How I Met Your Mother. I always get the yes.
Yeah. Well, and, I've been called a lot of things in my life. I've been called persistent. I've been called determined. I've been called insufferable. But I will.
All by your wife.
I will, yeah, mostly by my wife. And Chase, the 2 closest people to me in my life. But no, the person who called me insufferable was actually an old boss of mine. And a good friend of mine, too. But he meant it as a compliment, basically, because I just, never, ever let anything go. Ever. So I'm still incredibly confident that I'll turn those 2 no's that we got into yeses at some point. The one person who told us no that I'm hoping to get back in for Volume 3 or Volume 4, they've never sold their whiskey to anybody. And I spoke with him on the phone for about an hour and a half. It was an hour and a half conversation that ended in a no.
I understand you said no, but listen.
Yeah, but he did say that if they were to ever consider selling their whiskey to somebody, it would probably be us, is what he ended the phone call with. So
That's awesome.
That's why I'm optimistic that I can reopen that door, especially now that we've, both of the no's were for Volume 1. And like I said before, I'm surprised they all didn't say no. Here were Chase and I. We had been running the website for about a year and a half at that point. That's it. Like, I had worked for a couple distilleries. Chase had no, whiskey production experience or anything. Chase and I had never blended anything. Why? And here we were coming to these people, not just saying, like, hey, we want to do a blend, but we were saying, like, we want to do a blend like nobody else has ever done before, and we want to do it in a way that nobody has really done before. And we've
and we would put your logo on everything.
We're
So
gonna
if
put
it
your
sucks,
name.
you're gonna know right where this whiskey came
Yeah,
from.
I'm surprised that anybody said yes, but only 2 people said no. One I already said. The other one was an inventory issue. They just simply they didn't have barrels to sell us. And yeah, so I'm confident now that we've sort of proven our worth to a certain extent and proven that we were actually able to make this crazy concept happen in real life. Something that I lost sleep over before Volume 1 came out. Because it's such a cool idea. Like, let's make a blend that, altogether challenges the idea of what American whiskey is, but also highlights all of the individual components in a way where we can shine the light back on these other distilleries. Like, no evidence that was going to work or be realistic. So, I'm hopeful now that we're two releases in and we've proven that it does work and that we can do it. And that we can bring really cool people along, like Anne and like Ryan, to help us bring these things to life. That we're going to have more and more distilleries wanting to be a part of these releases. And that's just going to keep opening doors.
We have so much clout out there that you guys are going to... I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, with our powers combined,
Michael, you have anything?
I wanted to get a little more baseball out of you guys. Mets fan, Yankees fan, right? Who's your all-time favorite players?
Derek Sanderson Jeter.
It's his birthday today.
I did not know that.
Yeah, there you go. June 26th.
That's awesome.
Let's go!
That was going to be part of my trivia question, but I said I can't just go solely Yankees. I've got to mix it up. So
Yeah, but, Derek Jeter, he really transcends just the single team of the Yankees. He's kind of, everybody's captain.
Totally overrated,
Devin's
right?
moving his mic.
Oh, I
He
mean,
doesn't
I
even
mean,
want to
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about him.
Everybody, yeah.
There we go. The old World Series, Mike Piazza, thrown bat, Roger Clemens.
So
Love it.
I'll give you a little insight into my Mets fandom. So I live in a family of Mets fans. I was born in New York, lived in New York for the first 3.5 years of my life. Cut that part with the cough.
I'm leaving it.
Leave it in.
Put it.
No, grew up in New York. My family's Mets fans. My sister even she married into an even bigger Mets family. They've lived in Queens their whole life.
Oh, wow.
When I was a little kid, when I was in kindergarten, I wasn't super into baseball at that point. When I played,
Chase was still bullying you.
when I played Little League, I was like the one who sat in the outfield picking flowers. The only catch that I made in Little League was because the ball hit me in the head and fell in my glove. And when I came in, my coach was like, "When I said use your head, that was not what I meant."
Killing me, Smalls.
So here
right
I am. I'm kindergarten. I finally got Chase to like me, and Chase is a Yankees fan. This is also roughly, 1994, thereabouts. So the Yankees are pretty good. They're at the dawn of their empire of the time. So I said, you know what? I'm going to be a Yankees fan too. And I went home and I was like, I'm a Yankees fan. And my dad was like, what? And I was like, I'm a Yankees fan.
And so then you wipe the blood from your head and say, okay, Dad, I'll be a Mets fan.
But no, my parents were devastated, but they were also like, okay, whatever you want. And to be fair, I never watched a single Yankees game. But there was one day, and my parents were watching the Mets game, and I came in, I sat in the living room, and I watched this man come up to the plate. And he had this long flowy hair and a Fu Manchu, and he just looked like the meanest dude that I had ever seen in my life. And he hit a grand slam home run, and it was the coolest, most badass thing that I had ever experienced as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old. And then later that game, he's the catcher, and somebody comes to the plate and tries to knock him down, and he holds onto the ball. He takes off his helmet. He's like bleeding out of his eyebrow, and I'm just like, this is the coolest dude I've ever seen. I'm a Mets fan, and I've never not been a Mets fan since that moment. And obviously, that was Mike Piazza. And then fast forward, and you've got all the great stuff with the broken bat with Clemens, and like, he's just I became a baseball player in middle school and high school, and I became a catcher because of Mike Piazza, and he's the best. He's definitely the greatest Met that I've seen play since becoming a fan in the mid '90s, and
I mean, he was on Backyard Baseball, 2000,
that
2001.
yeah,
That just tells you
he was
one of the greatest.
which I played all the time, and he was always on the team with the backwards baseball cap. Yeah. Oh my god.
Pablo, did you just say Pablo?
Yeah.
That guy was so good.
Yeah, Backyard Baseball. That game was amazing.
That's a reference. I haven't thought about that game in so long.
The best player though was Pete.
Yeah.
Pete, the guy who was the redhead that was just
and
ran.
And there's Griffey was good, and then who was the other catcher that had the nickname? Pudge. Yeah. Oh man.
Good stuff.
Kenny in the wheelchair could pitch like frickin' Roger Clemens,
Yeah. And then I feel like the next iteration from Backyard Baseball was Wii Baseball. That was the next. That was like everybody who loved Backyard Baseball as a child then was in perfect trajectory timeline wise for when Wii Baseball came out in high school. I remember. Well, I probably shouldn't tell that story on air. Never mind.
The best thing that the Wii did though was because it put that wrist strap for the Backyard Baseball to Wii Baseball went doing the swing. Good thing that wrist strap was there.
Well,
yeah,
that's a part of the story that I can't tell on air, but I'll definitely tell you off air.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. It's been great learning about American Mash and Grain. I know Michael had the same question I did. Where does American Mash and Grain get its name?
It's a phenomenal question.
I love the laugh first.
Nobody has asked that. Gosh, man, that's digging deep.
It was your dad, wasn't it, Devin?
Was it?
Pretty sure. It's another one of those, like, we labored over the name for so long, and then we were just kind of like,
oh yeah,
fuck it.
My dad,
whatever's at the top of the charts. And I think it was your dad just said, how about like stop overthinking it? Just like call it American Mash.
Yeah, that's totally right. Thank you for jogging that memory, man. That was so long ago. But yeah, we were playing around with a ton of different names, and they all had the same words: American and grain and mash and. There were probably barrels and, everything that us whiskey people, try to come up with. And, yeah, we just couldn't do it. And then, I think it was my dad that was just like, what about American Mash and Grain? I was like, hey, that sounds really cool. Although most people know us as Mash and Grain. Most people sort of skirt past the American part.
Because that's where you are on Instagram, right? That's where we can find you?
Yeah. So pretty much on all social media platforms, we're at Mash, the letter N, Grain. So, Mash and Grain.
And there's your segue to Barrels N, Barrels, because we put the N right in the middle. So there's our parallels. And that, like, once you said it earlier, I was just like, they're just like us.
Yeah.
They're regular people just like us.
Last thing I do want to point out, so the other two of us who are part of the podcast, we're both wearing our hats. We're both Cubs fans. We got Mets fan Devin. You said you're a Yankee fan, Chase, but you're not wearing Yankees gear because you must not be proud of it. But you are wearing an LSU hat, and currently it looks like they're about to win the College World Series.
Hey, top of the ninth, 15-4.
15-4.
15-4. So
game.
I like their chances. It's closer than yesterday's game.
23-4? Is that what I saw?
Jesus.
I think it was 24.
The Mets lost 2-1 to the Brewers, so continuation on a disappointing season.
Cubs didn't lose today. Just saying. They didn't play, but they didn't lose.
It's hard to tell that Michael is a Cubs fan, actually. Because it's
what gave that away? Right?
I don't know. His room is incredibly subtle. You know,
I don't want to give out my secret too much.
For those of you who don't know,
well-
that's a joke, and you can find it on YouTube at Barrels and Barrels Pod. Oh yeah, mine's just a
Sammy
big ass
Sosa in the
tattoo
corner.
on the side of my body that says Chicago Cubs World Series champion. So I actually literally bleed Cubby blue, but Michael just likes to show it off to everybody.
yeah, he just paints it.
Yeah.
He just milks
The
it.
amount of
Yeah,
texts
it's
that I
actually
got back
the
and forth.
wall,
Should I paint it this
official.
color? Should I paint this wall? Should I paint this wall?
No, it was which walls. It was how much of the walls should I paint?
So the
blue?
amount of text that went back and
Oh,
forth
'cause
for Borrowed Page and your guys' ideas, that's kind of what we did for his whiskey room.
Probably for both volumes combined, I would imagine.
Gentlemen, again, thank you. And we can find you guys online on your website, which is your bread and butter. That's where everything started. And that's where we can find both Borrowed Pages. I think there's a bundle, too, right? You can buy both bottles online. So go check them out. American Mash and Grain, that is mashandgrain.com. Also, as Devin just mentioned, on social medias. You can find us on social media, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. That is at Barrels and Barrels Pod. We're on Twitter's Barrels and Barrels because Twitter's got a character limit. And then email us, barrelsandbarrels@gmail.com. Please rate us, review us, just like we rated and reviewed this whiskey. We're on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, Google, and iHeartRadio podcasts. Thank you again, Chase, Devin. It's been a pleasure having you on, getting to know more about you. Excited to see more about what goes on with American Mash and Grain in the next couple of months, the next couple of years, as you're relatively young. And as you mentioned, Borrowed Page Volume 3, hopefully later on this year. So, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks
Great
for
time.
having us.
And of course, and we're going to end this the way we always end it. Michael, you have any thoughts or things for our friends, family, viewers? Chase, Devin?
Let's go.